The special envoy to the Great Lakes region of Africa, Tom Perrielo, says he has full confidence in South Africa's role in the peace process in Burundi.
President Jacob Zuma and 4 other African heads of state have been appointed by the AU to try and find solutions to the Burundi crisis. In an exclusive interview with the SABC, Perrielo says he hopes to meet Burundian President Pierre Nkurunziza.
He will also visit Tanzania as part of the consultation process. Perrielo told SABC News foreign editor Sophie Mokoena that South Africa was better positioned to give guidance in the Burundi crisis since the country has played a role in bringing peace in the Great Lakes region.
I'm the President's Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region of Africa, and there's a great deal of concern right now among the people of the Great Lakes about these democratic transitions and the peace that has been built there for over a decade since the terrible wars of the 1990s ended with great support from South Africa in the mediation process. So as we see a true humanitarian as well as security crisis in Burundi, as well as a challenging political moment in the history of the Democratic Republic of Congo, I continue to travel across the continent, but particularly to places like South Africa that have such an enormous history and leadership role in ensuring a peaceful period forward for the Great Lakes region.
There was relative peace in the region, in the Great Lakes region, but currently there's instability. You look at the DRC on the eve of elections, you look at Burundi, there's so much violence there. As the U.S. administration, what are you doing to ensure that you work with the continent to assist the region to be at peace?
Well, we've tried to learn lessons from the past and understand that when we come and support the people in their desire for peace and democratic freedoms in partnership with the African Union and our African partners, that we can be a positive force for the people of the region. I think what you see in DRC among people east, west, north, and south is a real pride in the constitution that the Congolese people helped to forge, a pride in a peace process that, while not perfect, there continue to be armed groups in the East, has largely brought in an era of stability and some economic growth. And I think there's a real desire not to see that turn backwards. And there's a fear that efforts to change or break the Constitution, to extend stays in power, risks all of that progress that's been made. And I think that's in part because people have looked at the situation in Burundi and seen a situation in which 10 years of tremendous courage by the people of Burundi to build a post-conflict society with a lot of ethnic reconciliation and political reconciliation that have been led by civil society and faith groups and others, again with places like South Africa being great partners. All this work that had been done to put these divisions behind and then efforts to break the Constitution in Arusha and risk all of that was not what the people wanted, and I think they're looking for a way to get back to where the country was a year ago, where we were talking about that as a success story, talking about investing in Burundi instead of issues of sanctions and bankruptcy in the government. So it's a serious moment for the region, and one in which we continue to believe that there's great hope.
There was a proposal to send the troops in Burundi. Clearly, the African heads of state in Addis some few weeks ago took a decision not to, but rather to send an observer mission, both UN and the AU, to look at the situation in Burundi. Do you think that was a right decision?
Well, we certainly support the African Union as an important institution. President Obama has put a great emphasis on supporting the capacity of African peacekeeping to address crises on the continent, and I think is quite proud of the partnerships throughout the continent, certainly South Africa, Uganda, others who have been central in that effort. I think there were a couple signals that came out of the African Union summit. I was up there in Addis. One was a sense that sending troops was not quite ripe yet, but also an equally strong signal that the status quo is not working. And I think this head of state delegation is certainly in part going to, and I won't speak for them, but to say that this is a serious crisis that member states across the continent are taking seriously. I think one of the issues of gravest concern right now is that the government will not even allow the African Union monitors on the ground. And here are these terrible accusations being made against the government as well as the opposition, and you would think the government would want to allow independent monitors then to verify that these are not in fact true. These terrible things like torture, extrajudicial killing, destabilization, blurring of the lines between security forces and youth militias, that they would want independent monitors to come in. We now have from independent groups satellite imagery of mass graves, and I think the AU has been very clear about the need to get 250 monitors on the ground with terms of reference that allow them to do their job. So I think the AU has been quite clear that they take this very seriously, even if they think that a troop deployment is not quite ripe at this time.
How are you going to ensure that you play a role, but a credible role? Also, ensuring that you are not perceived as people with specific agendas, you know, putting your interests first.
I wish we could ensure it, but given the history and everything else, I think it would be impossible to convince everybody of our intentions at any given moment. I think what's important, first and foremost, is to start with, are we doing the right thing, and then deal with the perceptions around it. And I think one of the lessons we've learned is that when we try to respect the principle of subsidiarity, we are more likely to be doing the right thing. And I think we've tried to work very strongly through the African Union and through the East African community. Our main asks right now, in fact, of the government are to respect the East African community's regional dialogue to try to find peace talks through this that President Museveni is currently in charge of, and to ensure that the AU monitors are asked for. These are not talking about getting U.S. presence on the ground or a U.S. agenda that's somehow independent of what the regional bodies and the continental body has said. So we certainly want to show a great deal of support and appreciation for those efforts, and I think both bodies deserve credit. We probably have a greater sense of urgency for the speed of the EAC talks than we've seen thus far. Obviously, President Museveni has had some other things going on in Uganda, but I think this is where Tanzania, as the chairs of the EAC, South Africa as long-term partners in that process, can be a significant part of pushing it, and that's better than this being a U.S.-led initiative. But we've also learned from our past that we don't want to be in a situation where we haven't done enough when we're on the verge of mass violence or atrocities. We've learned that lesson as well. And I think what we see in Burundi so far is already a tremendous amount of human destruction and economic destruction. We have not seen the conflict take on a fully ethnic component, and I think that's in part because the AU and the US and others have been watching that vigilantly. So we neither want to over-engage based on things from the past, nor do we want to under-engage when people of the region are so vulnerable.